So let us get started with our episode today, Aliens, UFOs, and the Truth We Are Not Being Told. So for thousands of years, people have looked up at the sky and seen things that they couldn't explain. I'm not talking about stars or planets or anything like that. Ancient cultures described them as things like fiery shields or phantom ships. Today, we call them unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, or unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs, which is a term used by the government. Because now we have military pilots that are tracking these things on radar, watching them move in ways that shouldn't even be possible, and even they don't know what it is that they're looking at. So maybe the question no longer is, are we alone? Maybe it's, why are they here? And why now, after decades of denying their existence, does the government want us to know about them? So welcome back to Disturbingly Interesting, a show where we talk about all things strange and unusual, probably a little questionable, but always disturbingly interesting. I am Megan, your host for this otherworldly episode. Tonight we're talking about aliens, UFOs, and our government. So as humans, we've been seeing weird stuff in the skies for thousands of years. Again, ancient Romans and Greeks, they talked about fireballs and other unknown things that were just streaking through the skies, and they documented them in different ways. But when we look at more recent encounters, one of the first recorded sightings here in the United States was actually March 1st, 1639. John Winthrop, the governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, made a note in his diary. There was a recent strange event that had really shook up the locals. There were three men rowing a boat along the muddy river when they saw this strange light appear in the sky. The men claimed that when the light stood still, it flamed up or got brighter, and it was about 3 square yards. And then when it ran, or when it left, it contracted, and actually they said it looked like it contracted into the figure of a swine. And over the course of several hours, this light, it darted back and forth from where the men in the boat were to the nearby village of Charlestown, and it was witnessed by a lot of people. So that's one of our first recorded UFO encounters in the United States. But what really kicked off alien and UFOs, the stuff that we know today, it was what pilot Kenneth Arnold reported seeing in June of 1947. So while flying his single-engine light aircraft near Mount Rainier, Arnold claimed that on a clear afternoon, he saw a bunch of flashes of light, and out of those flashes came these 9 shiny circular objects that were darting around the sky. They were really, really fast. And when he described what he saw to reporters, he said they looked like saucers skipping across water, which, fun fact, is where we get the term flying saucer. So there's lots of stories of sightings. I think anybody that really, really loves this stuff, anybody can think of like their favorite UFO sighting story. But there is a couple of, I would say, more famous sightings or more well-known sightings. So about a month after Kenneth Arnold's sighting, UFO believers say that a rancher in Roswell, New Mexico, found a crashed alien spaceship out in the desert. There was debris, alien bodies, and it was all covered up by the government. They originally said that there was a crashed UFO, and then immediately came back with this story that it was a weather balloon. It wasn't anything. They retracted what they said. Another more famous incident or sighting was the Rendlesham Forest incident in 1980, and is known as Britain's Roswell. So U.S. military personnel that were stationed over in the UK, they reported seeing these strange, colorful lights and a metallic craft in the forest near the Royal Air Force Base in Woodbridge. Another, I guess, more well-known sighting is the Phoenix Lights. So this was a series of widely seen unidentified flying objects. They were observed over the skies of Phoenix in the southwest United States and over Nevada on March 13th, 1997. It was seen by thousands of people, and it was recorded by multiple people, and it was huge. It was this giant triangular shaped UFO that was spotted over, and they said it was so large that it like blocked out the stars when they could see it. It was apparently quite the sight. Hi, Kelly. Good to see you. Happy Tuesday. We just started talking about aliens. My favorite. So right now we're talking about some like famous or more well-known sightings. We talked about Kenneth Arnold, the Rendlesham Forest incident, Phoenix Lights, and more recently, the US and Canada objects. I don't know if you guys remember this, but February of 2023, a UFO was spotted flying over Alaska, and then it was eventually shot down over Canada by a US F-22 fighter jet. It made headline news. They were, I think originally they thought it was some kind of a Chinese weather balloon, but it was crazy that they were literally on the news telling us that there was a UFO that they were tracking. But even crazier than that is the story from the USS Nimitz. So November 14th, 2004, approximately 100 miles southwest of San Diego, California, the USS Princeton, which was a missile cruiser, reported tracking strange, unidentifiable objects over several days by radar. And like I said, what year was that? The UFOs over Canada was 2023. February of 2023. So the Princeton this was in 2004. The Princeton is tracking these crazy objects by radar, and nearby the USS Nimitz, which is a flight carrier, was nearby doing a training exercise. So Commander David Fravor and another pilot, they got in their fighter jets, and their goal was to intercept these, whatever these things were. And once they were able to catch up, Commander Fravor observed that these objects, they were performing these really erratic maneuvers, and they were dropping from like 80,000 to 20,000 feet. They were hovering above the water, and it was mirroring Favor's descent. They were rapidly accelerating and then vanishing in less than seconds. It was described as an oblong white, roughly 40 to 47 feet in length, with no wings, rotors, or visible exhaust trails. This is the one where the guy said it looked like a Tic Tac. So you remember the Tic Tac UFO? That is this one. When they say Tic Tac UFO, I immediately think this tiny little UFO, but this thing they said was about 40 to 47 feet in length. So later that crew, including Lieutenant Commander Chad Underwood, they captured that object on their FLIR video, which was later declassified by the Pentagon, and that is that video that you see floating around the internet right now of the Tic Tac. All right. So now the government secrecy. It's like for literal decades, the government has been going out of their way to cover up and dismiss any and all UFO and alien encounter stories. We talked about Roswell, but Roswell was crazy. So this rancher in New Mexico, again, claimed to find that crashed UFO and an alien body. And initially the military was like, hell yeah, we found a UFO. And it was even in the newspapers. And then very quickly, they retracted their statement and came up with that BS weather balloon story. Another Area 51. So this is that secret military base in Nevada that the government didn't even acknowledge its existence until 2013. Another one is David Grusch, the whistleblower testimony from 2023. So former intelligence official David Grusch testified to Congress that the U.S. government operates the secret decades-long UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. And he alleged the possession of non-human biologicals from crash sites, which was crazy to watch. I actually did watch that, and it was crazy to watch. But recently, the government has actually started to acknowledge these objects, these UFOs or UAPs, which is insane. So July 2023, Senator Chuck Schumer and Mike Rounds, in a bipartisan group with 4 other senators, they announced what's called the UAP Disclosure Act. And in 2026, the president, so this year, the president posted on social media that he was going to require federal agencies like the Pentagon to release classified information on UFOs and UAPs. But they already have. You probably just missed it. Hey, Kelly, did you know that when Bill Clinton first stayed in office, the first thing he did was ask about Area 51 and if we really had UFOs? You know what? If I was the president, if I ever got in that office, that would be one of the first questions I would ask too. Like, I just want people to tell me that it's true. But I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, we do not have to be the president anymore because, like I said, they've released information, which I don't know, again, if that's good or bad, that we're at a point in our lives where the government is literally telling us that there are UFOs and, like, now we just don't care. If it had been, 30 years ago, I think everybody would be losing their shit. Right now, people are like, no, I didn't catch that. But in June 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released the preliminary assessment on unidentified aerial phenomena. So I'm going to read you some of the passages from this. I won't, not the whole thing because that'd be boring, but I'm going to read you some of the stuff that I thought was very interesting out of these reports. So it says, after carefully considering this information, the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, the UAPTF, focused on reports that involved UAPs largely witnessed firsthand by military aviators and that were collected from systems that we considered to be reliable. When they say systems that they considered to be reliable, they mean the radar and stuff from military or U.S. government ships or stations. The reports described incidents that occurred between 2004 and 2021, with the majority coming from the last 2 years as the new reporting mechanism became better known to the military aviation community. So essentially, 2019, I think they said, so about 2019 is when they essentially got better at tracking them. So 144 reports originated from USG sources, so U.S. government sources. Of these, 80 reports involved observations with multiple sensors. Most reports described UAPs as objects that interrupted pre-planned training or other military activity. With the exception of one instance, where we determined with high confidence that the reported UAP was airborne clutter, specifically a deflated balloon, we currently lack sufficient information in our dataset to attribute incidents to specific explanations that could fall into a few different classifications. Because personally, I've always felt that there is no way there isn't anybody else in this universe because it's impossible. You don't even know an eighth of what's right. I think it is incredibly naive and incredibly silly to think that like we are the only things out there, especially like when you just learn about the vastness of space. I think it was I want to say Neil deGrasse Tyson. I could be wrong, but it was a scientist that essentially said that just mathematically it is impossible for us to be the only living thing out there, which is crazy to think about. But again, if you like logically, it just makes sense. So a couple of the classifications. So when they talked about those 144 reports, the one they know for sure was a deflated balloon. The other ones could have fallen into any of these categories, like airborne clutter. So these objects include birds, balloons, recreational unmanned aerial vehicles, or airborne debris like plastic bags. Kind of made me chuckle when I heard that. Plastic bags that really affected the radar in some way. just kind of jammed their stuff. Natural atmospheric phenomena, so natural phenomena like ice crystals, moisture, or thermal fluctuations, those can register differently on radar and infrared sensors. USG or industry development programs, so some UAP observations could be attributed to development of classified programs from the US or other entities. Foreign adversary systems, so some UAPs might be technologies deployed by China, Russia, or other nations. The last category is called other. So although most UAPs described in our database probably remain unidentified due to limited data or challenges to collect, process, or analyze, we may require additional scientific knowledge to successfully collect on and characterize them. Which I think, if we give a little, that, I mean, they're not saying that everything is unidentified because it's extraterrestrial. It's really just unidentified because they can't tell. They can't tell what it is. So, really kind of could be that. It says we would group such objects in a category pending on scientific advances that allowed us to better understand them. The UAPTF intends to focus on additional analysis on small number of cases where UAPs appeared to display unusual flight characteristics or signature management. So the report goes on to say, but some potential patterns do emerge. Although there was a wide variability in reports, the data set is currently limited to allow details for trend and pattern analysis. There was some clustering of UAPs that were being observed regarding their shape, size, and their peculiarity. UAP sightings also tended to cluster around U.S. training and testing grounds, which would make sense if they're only using military radar to track them. It would make sense that they're really only seeing them around military installations. And they mentioned that in here. They said we assessed that it might be a little bit of a bias. They said a handful of UAPs appear to demonstrate advanced technology. So this is from the report. In 18 incidents described in 21 different reports, observers reported unusual UAP movement patterns or flight characteristics. Some UAPs appeared to remain stationary while in the wind, move against the wind, maneuver abruptly, or move at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion. In a small number of cases, military aircraft systems processed radio frequency energy associated with the UAP sightings. And the UAPTF holds a small amount of data that would appear to show UAPs demonstrating acceleration or a degree of signature management. So they are being controlled by something. But additional rigorous analysis would need to be done by multiple experts, but teams or groups of technical experts need to determine the nature and validity of the data. We are conducting further analysis to determine if breakthrough technologies were demonstrated. So I just think it is absolutely insane that this is a government report. I pulled it off of the Director of National Intelligence website, .gov. And I will put it in the description of this when I go back to it so that you guys can read them. I'll put the links to them in there because it's crazy. There's another report. The newest one was June 1st of 2024. It's very similar to the other one, so I won't go through all of that. But this report covers the UAPs that were reported from May 1st, 2023 to June 1st, 2024, and then any UAPs from the previous time period that weren't talked about. So of these reports, 708 occurred in the air domain, 49 occurred in the space domain, and none of them occurred in the maritime or transmedium domain. They do note that all the ones that were seen or spotted in space were not actually spotted by astronauts. They were spotted from military planes or people on the ground that were able to see them. So the question I think is why? Why are they releasing this information? Again, like after all this time of gaslighting everyone, saying you're crazy, there's nothing out there. Why all of a sudden are they like, all right, let them, give them the information. It's what they want. But, or is it because some people have claimed things that are actually true? Like those who have claimed to have encountered real extraterrestrials or been abducted. So there are the famous abduction cases out there. First one being the Pascagoula, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Pascagoula abduction case from 1973. So Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker reported being taken aboard a craft while fishing in Pascagoula, Mississippi. So according to Hickson, the pair had been fishing off the pier on the west bank of the river when they heard this whirring and whizzing sound. They saw some blue flashing lights and observed this oval-shaped object that was 30 to 40 feet across and 8 to 10 feet high. They claimed that 3 creatures with pincers for hands took them aboard the object and subjected them to an examination and then returned them back to the wharf. So this story, these 2 men went to the police station right away afterwards. And then immediately the police were telling them that they were drunk, that they didn't know what they were talking about, and then proceeded to try to discredit them in any way that they could. Probably I should say like the next most famous story is that the Travis Walton story from 1975. So the forestry worker in Arizona who reportedly vanished for 5 days after seeing lights over a logging site. So the crew was driving home in the evening and they stopped when they saw this strange light out in the woods. Travis got out to investigate and he was walking closer to the light when he was struck by another beam of light and he fell to the ground. The rest of the crew freaked out and they ran because they were scared and they reported it right away to the police. And then 5 days later, Travis Walton returns with this crazy story. And then the case was later turned into the film Fire in the Sky. And then Travis Walton, I feel like, went on like a UFO tour, became like a kind of a celebrity in the UFO world, wrote books and such. I would agree, Vicky. I think it is conceited to think we are the only life out there. Maybe they realized we're not all stupid finally. Probably. Well, they probably realized like we're going to find out, like in the age of the internet, you can't hide stuff anymore. We're going to find it. So maybe it's one of these, I'll just give it to them and then they'll stop complaining about it. Or maybe they want to draw our attention away from all the crap they're doing. True story. I believe that as well. So 2 of the, I would say, more famous abduction cases that stand out to me for a couple different reasons. One is the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case from 1961. So the encounter took place in September. Betty and Barney were returning to Portsmouth from Montreal, and they spotted a light in the sky that was following them, which Barney claimed to observe through his binoculars, and he said it was like a cigar-shaped craft with non-human figures. All of a sudden, they were missing time. They arrived home. They were disoriented, having lost roughly 2 hours of time and was unaccounted for. They had a bunch of physical evidence like torn clothes. They had scuffed shoes like they'd been dragged, and these strange marks all over their car. These like a bunch of circles, like a circle pattern all over the back of their car. They had no idea what happened. They just thought, wow, that was really, really crazy. Not really sure what happened there. It wasn't until years later that they underwent hypnosis with Dr. Benjamin Simon, and that's when they revealed that they had consistent stories of being taken that night. They were taken aboard this ship, and then while Barney's recollections were marked with extreme fear, Betty's really weren't. She had more like conversations with the aliens. But as an aftermath, the case became this foundation for the UFO lore, including the Zeta Reticuli star map that Betty claimed she was shown. So one of the things about this one that's crazy is that Betty drew this star map from memory, and it turns out to have been pretty accurate. And at that time, the Zeta Reticuli hadn't been like mapped yet. They didn't really know about it yet. Anyway, she had this accurate drawing and would have had no way to know. But she claimed she was shown that map. And skeptics, they suggest that the memories were a combination of stress, dreams, maybe hypnotic suggestion from the doctor. And then others consider it this kind of landmark event. Like how could they make this stuff up? I think one of the reasons that this stands out so much to me is because Betty and Barney Hill had like nothing to gain from this. They didn't want this to be leaked to the public. It's kind of a lot like the Donald Shrum case, or like I had said it, to me, it's like the most believable UFO encounter story ever. So the guy was in the tree and the robots came, like the robot aliens came after him and he was in there for like all night. But it's kind of like that. Like they didn't have anything to gain from it. They didn't make any money. They didn't become famous in any way that they wanted to be. So why make it up? And the other thing with Betty and Barney Hill is this was 1961 and they were an interracial couple. So they already had like a bunch of eyes on them and being scrutinized for stuff. So it's like, why would they want to draw attention with this crazy story? The other one that I think is very strange and also is a Netflix documentary now is that of Linda Napolitano. So she was the alleged abduction victim in New York City. So the story is that there's a bunch of people that witnessed a woman that was being levitated from her high-rise apartment up above into the sky, up to this craft. And it was witnessed apparently by like tons of different people. So Napolitano, she said she was taken by aliens from her apartment in Manhattan. She was a housewife, stay-at-home mom. And she said on the night of November 30th, 1989, 3 non-human beings appeared in her bedroom. They made her levitate out of her 12th story apartment window and then into a spacecraft hovering above the city. So what sets her story apart, I think, from some of the others were actually the alleged witnesses of her abduction. So allegedly there were reports of witnesses seeing this happen from the street, from their apartments. Police officers apparently saw this. They had claimed they'd seen this woman being levitated out of their window. And then supposedly a high-ranking government official, along with his bodyguards, had seen this. Bud Hopkins, who was a prominent figure in the UFO field, or alien abductions, he really believed Linda's story and even claimed to have spoken and received information from some of these witnesses. So it's really, really crazy. Now, if you get a chance, I cannot remember what it's called off the top of my head, but it's on Netflix. It's a documentary of her story. And it's just crazy because she is one of those ones, again, that just kind of went on the UFO circuit and really used this to her advantage to become famous. And then Bud Hopkins was, again, really well known in the industry. But in the documentary, it was actually Bud Hopkins' ex-wife, who was a filmmaker, that is really calling bullshit on Linda's story and how it doesn't make any sense. And then how Bud kind of refused to see it. It's actually a pretty good documentary. But those are some of the more famous, I guess, UFO abduction stories. But I think we can move into my favorite topic, which is the conspiracy theories. This is the good stuff. This is the fun stuff. So we talk about conspiracy theories when it comes to this. It's stuff like the ancient aliens, Men in Black, or even like claims from Bob Lazar. So these 3 things are kind of like some pillars of the modern ufology. So with ancient aliens, if you guys have ever seen the show with Giorgio, is it Giorgio Tsoukalos? The guy with the crazy hair. God, I love that show. But so with ancient aliens, the theory is essentially that there's ancient astronauts that came down and visited Earth, interacted with early human civilizations and then influenced the way that essentially we developed. And it's claimed that you can see this in stuff like the pyramids or the Nazca lines, or even with some of the ancient texts or the ancient artwork. And then, again, the story suggests that they had intervened in our evolution, influencing our architecture, our technology, and then often interpreting religious texts as encounters with superior or non-human entities. Hair guy. He is. Like, you know what I'm talking about? He's like, and like my favorite meme to use is the one where he's like, aliens. I use it all the time. I love that one. Second kind of conspiracy-ish theory is the Men in Black, the MIB. These are apparently men or beings or entities that are alleged agents. Wow. Alleged agents who are silencing UFO witnesses. So the MIB theory suggests that these government, military, or other agents, they're all in black suits, and they're pretty, like, plain, I guess you could say. They look strange, that they visit UFO witnesses and then, like, try to intimidate them into silence. It was popularized by an author, Gary Barker, in the 1950s, particularly in his book, They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. So the story is these figures are described as appearing unnatural, sometimes driving black cars with no license plate, and then again, appearing shortly after a sighting. So also a good movie. A good couple of movies. I think they made a couple remakes of it. I love Men in Black. This was a funny one. The other one is Bob Lazar. So this is a guy that claims that he worked at Area 51 and that he reverse engineered alien craft using a special kind of element. So in 1989, Bob Lazar, he claimed to have worked on this stuff for the U.S. Air Force and that he allegedly was reverse engineering 9 different types of alien spaceships. And he had different names for them too, like the sport model, or like the egg shape. Apparently that was what he did. He gave him just these cute little names. But he described the craft as they were using these like stable isotope elements to generate gravity waves for propulsion. So he made all these claims, and he said he studied at places like MIT and Caltech, and that the government, the Men in Black, were coming and like trying to shut him down. They were erasing his past. I cannot remember the name of the reporter, but it was one of the first people that Bob Lazar had talked to, and he called MIT and asked if, they had record of him, and they said no, they didn't. But then when he looked back at like an old phone book or old phone records, they could see him in there. So like the claim was that they were trying to erase his history because he was spilling the beans. The sport model have a spoiler on the back. Yeah, and it had one of those big like tin can exhaust pipes. It sounded crazy. So if we look at the, if we're fair people, we'll look from a skeptical perspective too. What else could it be? Be misidentifications, natural explanations, human error even. I mean, things are paranormal. Things can be paranormal, which really just means that it's not scientifically explainable, right? It's not normal. And there are actually quite a few examples of natural phenomena that humans once believed were supernatural or paranormal, but turned out to be, normal. One of the ones I love is the real life cryptids. So like the panda bear, the platypus, and the mountain gorilla, they were all once thought to be mythical creatures or folklore. I oftentimes think about the first person to see a platypus and what that must have been like. And how do you explain that to people? And no wonder people thought they were mythical creatures. Another one is the aurora borealis or northern lights. They're often considered, or they were often considered the spirits of the dead or war omens. We know now that those are natural phenomena. Lightning, at one point, was a weapon of the gods. So you're like Thor. Was misunderstood. So they thought it was magical or divine in some way. But again, we know that that is normal or natural, I guess you could say. And then glowing plants. I didn't even think about this one until I started doing the research for this. But glowing, like bioluminescence, right? So different types of bioluminescent plants or algae or fish. So it all looks very unnatural and I would think magical if you didn't know what it was. But again, we know those are all natural organisms or chemicals that appear in nature. So because if you look at it from a skeptical perspective, maybe it is just something that we are not sure of yet. We don't know yet, but maybe it is natural. Maybe the guy that channels the alien, Bashar, maybe he's just channeling somebody natural, which is pretty crazy. I don't know if you guys are into a lot of the internet conspiracy theory stuff, but so supposedly, now not this guy, but another guy got abducted like 12 years ago by the lady. I think he said they just called her the lady. And so the lady told him that when the certain stars align, when everything's in retrograde or whatever, then there will be aliens will appear. Like we will all see these aliens. Well, when they did the math, they figured that it would end up being Easter 2026. So Sunday. I don't know about you guys, but I didn't see any aliens. No aliens at all. So as much as I want to believe the people who channel, the people who have talked to aliens, still haven't seen any yet. But I guess the big questions are we alone? Or kind of what is happening here? I think we all agree that it would be, I don't know, it would be silly of us to think that we were alone out there. I was watching of course, so I'm doing the research for this episode. So now my FYP is all, is my algorithm FYP. It's all aliens and UFO stuff now. And I was watching, I think it was an Expedition Unknown, and they were trying to like summon aliens by using lasers, like laser grids. And they're saying, yeah, we heard that if you use lasers, you can like lure them in or summon them in. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, do you know how silly that sounds? Like these are, if this is what you think is going to happen, these are beings in technology that is flying through this universe, managing to come here, and they're so advanced, but yet we're thinking we can just kind of like call them in like a dog, like pss, 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 your cat, come here, come on, come here. I thought that was just a stupid thing to say. Like they're that advanced, but you're just gonna trick them with a laser to call them in so you can come get a picture of them. The other thing again is like, all of this information that the government is not leaking out. I guess it's not leaking. They're not leaking it at all. They're just giving it away. And then with the president saying that he was going to like require agencies to release this information. I believe he said that in February. But Kelly, what better way though to spy on humans than if aliens were bugs? Look at the praying mantis and tell me that's not an alien. Agreed. It's actually a cryptid, mantis man. Aliens are giant space cats, right? Like, come on. You can't, like, we are like we're just now going back to the moon, right? In like 60 years, we're just doing this, but intergalactic beings, like they're dumb enough to fall for our little laser trick? I don't think so. But it does kind of make you wonder, why are they telling us? Again, I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but why are they letting the cat out of the bag? Right? Because maybe it's not about whether or not aliens exist. Like, maybe it's more about what is the government expecting to happen next, that they want us to be prepared for it. I don't know. It's pretty crazy. But I love this stuff. I cannot get enough of aliens and UFOs. I love the stories. I think it sounded cool. I want to see a UFO. I've never seen a UFO. I want to see a UFO. I also want to see Bigfoot. I've not seen Bigfoot either. Although I do think Bigfoot's an alien, but that's a whole other show. All right, you guys. We are, oh my gosh, almost 45 minutes. That is the show. Thank you so much for coming. Again, I'm Megan. This is Disturbingly Interesting. And if you made it this far, Vicky and Kelly, thank you so much. I appreciate you hanging out with me. It's been a lot of fun. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe if you want more content just like this. And if you want to hear about a particular topic, just let me know. I'm more than happy to go down the rabbit hole for all kinds of other stuff too. And hopefully, if you enjoy it, we'll see you back here next Tuesday, 7 p.m. Central Time, for another disturbingly interesting show. Again, thank you guys so much. This was a lot of fun. Have a good night.